Mark undergoes intense training under Cecil's supervision, pushing his limits. Over the past 90 days, his speed has increased by 65%, his endurance by 70%, and his strength by an impressive 138%. Meanwhile, the science team continues designing more advanced drills, preparing him for the inevitable confrontation with the viltrumites. With larger threats looming, Mark and Rex respond to a robbery at the archive building, where two time travelers are attempting to steal the Declaration of Independence. During the fight, Rex is ambushed by Multiball, Duplicate's brother, until Mark steps in to turn the tide. After the battle, Paul vents his anger over Kate's supposed death, only for it to be revealed that she survived by keeping a duplicate hidden away, and is now engaged to the immortal. Multipol is then taken into custody. Elsewhere, Oliver begins displaying signs of emerging powers, while Donald monitors a string of unusual incidents occurring across the country. Mark also struggles to navigate his relationship with Eve, despite Rick's warning not to bring up the other Eve, the Eve from another dimension that confessed her love for Mark. He insists on being honest to avoid repeating past mistakes, and the result is predictably awkward. Cecil grows frustrated that Debbie hasn't informed him about Oliver's developing abilities and demands that Oliver undergo testing. Debbie blatantly refuses, but ultimately agrees to let Oliver begin training with his brother. Things escalate when Doc Seismic, who has secretly been communicating with underground creatures in his prison cell, captures all the heroes on Earth using his spider-like creatures. At first, Mark and Eve remain free, but they're eventually captured during the rescue attempt. Cecil responds by deploying his trump card, Darkwing II, and with the help of Sinclair's reanimate, Darkwing subdues Doc Seismic and frees the heroes. But furious over Cecil working with criminals rather than imprisoning them, tensions boil over when Mark storms into the White Room to confront Cecil, only to find himself face to face with a group of reanimates. Episode 2 opens in the past with a young Cecil Stedman as a GDA field agent investigating the Order of the Freeing Fist and their Chemical X bomb. After discovering the device hidden inside a storefront, Cecil is ambushed by Knucklebuster and Force Fist. Though he signals backup in secret, the cultists activate the bomb. Cecil forces them into the closet with the device containing most of the blast, but losing his skin in the process. 17 civilians still die. Rebuilt with synthetic skin, Cecil keeps one scar as a reminder of its failure. Later, when the same extremists are reformed and used by the GDA, Cecil executes them, refusing to work alongside criminals. For this, he's imprisoned. Over 3 years, he brings order to the prison, impressing Director Radcliffe, who offers him the role of GDA director. Radcliffe tells him he must choose, be the good guy or be the one who saves the world. In the present, Mark confronts Cecil in the White Room over Sinclair, Darkwing, and the reanimate. Cecil reveals he implanted a sonic failsafe in Mark's head while he was recovering from Omni Man. When Mark attacks, Cecil activates it, subduing him. Mark escapes to Guardians HQ, where Cecil attempts to retrieve him, but the Guardians intervene. Reanimate are deployed, and Rudy disables the signal. Enraged, Mark destroys the reanimate and threatens Cecil, vowing to never work for him again. The Guardians split over this incident. Rex, Monster Girl, Shrinking Ray, Bulletproof, and Rudy walk out, reforming the teen team, while the immortal, Kate, Shapesmith, and Black Samson remain. Meanwhile, Mark questions whether he should have permanently stopped Sinclair, but William and Rick remind him that killing isn't who he is. Debbie goes on a date with Paul as Oliver grows more eager to become a hero. Cecil reinstates Darkwing to the Guardians and reflects on his first encounter with Nolan, remembering the lesson Radcliffe taught him: you can be the good guy or the one who saves the world, but not both. Eve struggles with their fears about their future, but after nearly dying at Cecil's hands, Mark confesses that his feelings for her are real, and this time Eve accepts his feelings. Episode 3 opens with a montage highlighting the blurred lines between heroes and villains. Magmaniac and Tether Tyrant, two desperate lovers looking to turn their lives around, attempt a bank robbery that is quickly stopped by Bulletproof. Inspired by the encounter, they briefly tried to go straight, but after losing their jobs and falling into homelessness, they are forced to return to crime. When they rob the same bank again, Invincible arrives to stop them, and Oliver jumps into the fight as as well. Soon after, Mark decides to begin properly training Oliver to become a hero. At Art's tailor shop, Oliver excitedly suggests the name Kid Omni Man, which immediately alarms Mark because of its obvious connection to their father. Art also reveals Mark's new black and blue costume. Their discussion is interrupted by the news of a superpowered incident at Peyton Penitentiary. Oliver wants to join the fight, but Mark insists he stay back and observe. Meanwhile, Eve begins attending classes at Upstate University, studying architecture and engineering to better understand her powers. After class, she runs into Amber and the two catch up. Amber reveals she already knew that Eve and Mark would be good together and mentions she's now dating someone new named Kyle. Elsewhere, the former teen team, now operating independently, move into their old headquarters. As the group settles in, they reflect on their past and the early days of Teen Team. At the same time, Titan is confronted by Mr. Liu of the Order, who demands that he retrieve the imprisoned Multipole. Titan refuses, insisting he only cares about running his city. However, his associate Isotope warns that the Order controls territories worldwide and will replace Titan if he refuses. Reluctantly, Titan agrees to break Multipole out of prison. At Peyton Penitentiary, Mark confronts the villains, Kursk and Furnace, during a prison break tied to Titan. Oliver ignores Mark's instructions and charges into the fight, quickly getting injured and earning a harsh lecture from his brother. Later, Mark and Oliver return home and run into Debbie with their new date Paul. The awkward encounter exposes their identities and even leads to Mark being jokingly called Invincible Boy. That night, Mark and Eve share a quiet moment on a rooftop. Eve has just confronted her parents about accepting her powers, while Mark admits how difficult balancing hero life and personal relationships has become. Despite everything, they agree that having each other makes the chaos easier to face. But the peace doesn't last long. When the Muller twins break into a nuclear silo and are attempting to launch a nuclear weapon, Cecil sends the new Guardians, but they are swiftly disposed of. Mark intervenes to stop the disaster, and Oliver follows him into combat. The nuke is launched, but Mark manages to carry it into space and disable it. But Oliver disobeys his orders and fights the Maulers alone. In a brutal moment, Oliver loses control and takes out both twins. The aftermath leaves Mark shaken. Oliver shows little remorse, echoing the ruthless mindset of their father, and Mark realizes just how dangerous unchecked power can become. Mark struggles with how to guide his brother without letting him follow their father's path. And just when the night seems over, a final twist is revealed. Someone is watching from the shadows, silently observing Mark and his family. Episode 4 opens with Rex and Ray on a grocery trip, where Ray admits she's getting sick of the hero life, but for Rex, he doesn't know who he'd be without his hero persona. Their normal errand is suddenly interrupted when a monster appears and attacks. Meanwhile, Mark brings the badly damaged remains of a drone that had been stalking his family to a robot. The machine is too destroyed to trace its origin, but the level of technology and resources involved raises suspicion, leading Mark to believe Cecil may be responsible. Determined to find answers, Mark infiltrates the Pentagon in search of evidence. When he doesn't get the confession he wants from Cecil, he abruptly leaves, unaware that Cecil continues to closely monitor his movements. Mark has a date night planned with Eve, but they are interrupted by Dropkick and Fightmaster, who suddenly arrive in Paris through a glowing portal from the future. Interrupting Mark's planned date with Eve, they ask for his help. Although Mark initially refuses to get involved, he is pulled through the portal into a devastated future where much of America has become a ruined wasteland. In this timeline, a once respected ruler slowly descended into madness, enforcing brutal laws and mandatory labor camps before a massive rebellion broke out. The time travelers explain that they stole the Declaration in an attempt to stop this tyrant, revealed to be the Immortal himself. Because of the Immortal's immense strength, they believed only someone as powerful as Mark could stand against him. Mark is eventually captured and brought before the Immortal, forcing the two into a brutal confrontation. At first, Mark refuses to end his misery, but ultimately ends up ripping him into two. While the Immortal's death restores hope to the Resistance, the act leaves Mark deeply disturbed by what he had to do. Elsewhere, Alan the alien remains imprisoned within a viltrumite facility. Determined to change the course of the war against the Viltrum Empire, he tries to convince Nolan to join the coalition of planets. Although Nolan initially appears resigned to his fate, Alan starts a prison break when the Viltrumites attempt to execute him. Chaos erupts throughout the prison as Alan begins freeing all the prisoners and even frees battle beast, whose love of battle only intensifies the destruction. They locate Nolan and break into the execution room, ready to battle against the two viltrumite executioners. The conflict escalates further, forcing Omni Man to join the fight and help his new friend Alan. Their battle is pulled into space, where Battle Beast continues his fight against one viltrumite executioner, while Alan and Nolan team up together to defeat the other, in a brutal finishing move. In the aftermath, with one viltrumite defeated, Alan emphasizes the importance of standing together against their common enemy. Nolan then reveals a critical secret. Fewer than 50 pure-blooded viltrumites remain alive in the universe. Episode 5 begins with a prison breakout attempt by Multipole, who uses his powers to fill up his cell. While one clone is boosted to the ceiling, his clones press against the reinforced door until the pressure causes it to fly off its hinges, leaving the one clone to escape. He makes it all the way to the main prison door until the guards eventually tag him with a power-dampening collar. After the breakout, Kate visits her brother in prison and expresses concern that his behavior will likely lead to an even longer sentence. Their strained relationship is explored through a flashback to their childhood, revealing how their uncontrolled powers and constant duplication pushed their father to madness. After their father lost his mind, the twins were taken away and trained by the government. Over time, Paul rejected the system entirely and eventually became an assassin working for the Order. Paul's escape attempt is part of a larger conflict. Mr. Liu, angry that Titan couldn't break his agent out, begins threatening him and his daughter. Feeling the pressure, Titan visits Machine Head in prison, looking for his advice on how to deal with the Order. Meanwhile, life at home becomes increasingly awkward for Mark and Eve. During breakfast, Oliver casually exposes that Eve slept over at their house, and Mark brings up the idea of moving out. Debbie tries to convince him to stay, but Mark and Eve ultimately decide they should find part-time jobs to afford rent on their own. Eve also secretly launches a service called Invincible Inc., offering their superhero assistance to paying clients. Later, Debbie tells Mark that Oliver has been sneaking out at night. Concerned, Mark follows him and discovers Oliver hanging out with a group of local kids. When a group of bullies arrive and begin causing trouble, Oliver uses his super speed to quickly embarrass one of the bullies, diffusing the confrontation. Elsewhere, Rex spends time at the new headquarters and cooks dinner for Ray as the two start to look more than friends. At the same time, Titan reaches out to Mark for help dealing with the escalating situation involving Mr. Liu and the Order. When Mr. Liu learns that Multipole is still in prison, he storms Titan's office and reveals his true form, transforming into a massive dragon, throwing Titan off the building before taking it into his own hands and attacking the prison directly. The battle quickly spreads throughout the facility as Mark and Eve arrive to help contain the chaos. The fighting damages the prison, breaking open cells and allowing several inmates to escape. Eve diverts her attention to stopping the prisoners from escaping, including Multipole, but he ultimately tricks her into thinking he's trapped. Mark is left alone against Mr. Liu and struggles to hold the dragon back. The situation is finally resolved when Machine Head suddenly appears and shoots Mr. Liu's human host, the vessel controlling the dragon. It's then revealed that everything was orchestrated as part of Machine Head's plan to eliminate Mr. Liu and consolidate power within the Order. Machine Head assumes control while Titan is allowed to officially separate himself from the organization. In the aftermath, Mark and Eve reconsider their plans about moving out, a decision that quietly brings Debbie some relief. Elsewhere, the body of Mr. Liu is brought to an ancient temple, and he is somehow revived by the dragon's spirit. In episode 6, we flash back to Chicago, right before Mark's fight with his father. Scott Duvall meets with his sister and his niece on what seems like a peaceful day, until a massive explosion devastates the city when Mark is punched by Omni Man into a nearby skyscraper, leaving countless dead, including Scott's sister and niece. Consumed by grief and anger, Scott begins gathering support for justice, collecting signatures and demanding a formal investigation and trial. When his efforts are ignored, he takes a job as a researcher at the Pentagon, while still keeping tabs on Invincible. Meanwhile, Mark and Eve supervise Oliver as he confronts the supervillain known as the Elephant, a low-level criminal they use as target practice. At home, Powerplex secretly tracks Invincible's movements, while his wife helps him test the biothermal discs he stole from the Pentagon that allow him to convert kinetic energy into electrical blasts. Later during dinner, the conversation shifts to the progress of Mark and Eve's business, while Paul discusses his own real estate venture with Debbie, quietly expressing uncertainty about where he fits into their superhero family. That evening, Scott throws himself from a rooftop, ready to finally confront Invincible, but Mark is busy on a triple date with William, Amber, and her new boyfriend. He sees Powerplex on TV but decides to ignore him. Powerplex continues to rant about Invincible, but Shapesmith ends up being the hero sent instead. Shapesmith turns himself into Invincible for fun, but this only angers Scott, sending out an electrical surge that knocks him out. Scott leaves the scene while his partner suggests that another opportunity to confront Invincible may arise at the upcoming Chicago Memorial. Elsewhere, Robot works to develop a new belt for Amanda that stabilizes the de-aging effects of her Monster Girl transformations. At the same time, Rex and Shrinking Ray begin discussing their future with the team. Rex struggles with the idea of leaving due to his close ties to everyone, but Ray has already made the decision to move on and live a normal life. Later, when the whole Grayson family attend the memorial to honor those that were killed in Chicago, Powerplex makes another appearance and calls out Invincible, only to encounter Adam Eve instead. She quickly overpowers him, and although the Guardians manage to arrest him, Scott soon escapes custody. The incident forces Mark to reflect on the immense loss of life caused by his battles, and to question whether Cecil has been shielding him from the true consequences of those tragedies. Shortly afterward, Mark meets with Donald, who shares a file detailing Scott's past and the devastating losses that fueled his hatred for Invincible. Desperate to force Mark into a confrontation, Scott stages a kidnapping using his own wife and child as bait. Invincible arrives on the scene, but the situation spirals out of control during the fight when Scott loses control of his electrical powers and accidentally fries his own wife and son. Consumed with anger and grief, Powerplex once again blames Invincible, but he is eventually overpowered and taken into custody. Scott leaves Mark with the painful realization of how deeply his battles have affected the lives of ordinary people. And the episode ends with a chilling reveal. Angstrom Levy is somehow still alive, and he has a whole army of Invincible variants at his disposal. Episode 7 flashbacks to Mark after he thought he had ended Angstrom Levy, but in reality Angstrom was still alive, barely conscious yet still able to open a portal to another dimension, where the mysterious technicians save his life. Months later, Angstrom finally puts his revenge into motion. He releases multiple alternate versions of Invincible into the main universe, ordering them to spread chaos and destruction across Earth. The catastrophic 3-day assault that follows will later be known as the Invincible War. Meanwhile, Mark and Eve are together at her house when the attacks begin. Their conversation is interrupted by reports of an attack at the prison where Mohawk Mark is sent. Outside Buckingham Palace, Stripe Vincible crushes a hero, and in Moscow, prisoner Mark destroys everything in sight. Viltrumite Mark confronts Wolfman. In Hong Kong, Sinister Mark clashes with Best Tiger, while high above Earth, Tech Jacket engages Mustache Mark in orbit. Soon, the real Invincible arrives at the prison and comes face to face with Mohawk Mark. The variant initially mistakes Mark for an ally before realizing he is the Invincible of this world, and the two clash in a brutal fight until Mark disables him by smashing both of his ears. However, the fight quickly spirals into chaos when Knockout, Kid Thor, and Bolt arrive and mistakenly assume Mark is one of the evil variants. As they attack him, Powerplex escapes during the confusion and, surprised to see multiple Invincibles, tries to take on Mohawk Mark, but with no avail. Debbie lets Oliver join the war effort while Mohawk Mark is shown being defeated by Mark and the heroes. At the Pentagon, Cecil and Donald monitor the situation as Reanimate tear apart Flax and Mark. With their resources collapsing, Cecil orders every available hero on Earth to be mobilized. As the war intensifies, heroes from across the planet are deployed into battle. Fighters like Two Punch Man and Business Baby are sent through transporters to confront the variants. During the chaos, Oliver rescues civilians before encountering another variant, Cap Vincible. Elsewhere, Invincible and Adam Eve survey the devastation and run into a bunch of heroes fighting against Hood Vincible. In the desert, the Immortal punches No Goggles Mark straight into the tomb of Kahor, but he is unable to successfully possess the host. Oliver appears to be no match for Cap Vincible until Throwbolt and Bug-Eye arrive to assist him. Sinister Mark is put against Chupacabra. The hunk is overpowered by No Mask Mark, Emperor Mark has no problem dealing with Big Mildew and Business Baby. Longhair Mark destroys other no-named heroes. Meanwhile, Invincible and Adam Eve beat the crap out of Hoodvincible, only for Omni Mark to suddenly appear. Omni Mark overwhelms Eve with his speed, snapping her leg and preparing to end her before Mark intervenes. Cecil deploys the reanimant to stall both variants while ordering Mark to get Eve to safety. At the Guardians' headquarters, No Goggles Mark massacres multiple heroes, including the Immortal, before Darkwing II sacrifices himself, dragging the variant into the Shadowverse. At the Teen Team's base, Goggles Mark makes short work of Robot and Monster Girl. Gravely injured already, Rex tells Bulletproof to take them and leave. He takes on the variant on his own, but when he is clearly outmatched, commits the ultimate sacrifice, detonating his own skeleton in a massive explosion, taking them both out. Meanwhile, devastation spreads worldwide as heroes and variants alike are slaughtered during the chaos. Mark selfishly chooses to stay by Eve's side at the hospital for the rest of the war, while outside, heroes continue to fight against the variants, while others commit destruction all over the globe. By the third day, most of the major cities on Earth are laid in ruins. The remaining 8 variants gather above the Grayson house, where Angstrom prepares the next phase of his plan. He had promised each of them something if they joined him, but when they turn on Angstrom, he banishes them into the Wasteland dimension. Back in the main universe, Cecil informs Mark they found Angstrom and teleports him directly there for a final confrontation. The two clash violently as Angstrom unleashes waves of drones and portals in an attempt to overpower him, but eventually Mark gains the upper hand. Encouraged by Oliver to finish him once and for all, Mark hesitates at the last second, allowing Angstrom to escape through a portal. In the Technician's dimension, Angstrom begs them to help him, but seeing as he did not honor his promises, Angstrom has no choice but to work for them now. With the end of the Invincible War, the resulting devastation is unimaginable. Major cities around the world lie in ruins. Millions may be dead. Countless heroes have been killed or critically injured. Overwhelmed by guilt, Mark struggles with the realization that Angstrom's revenge and the destruction of the Invincible War happened because he let him live. The Immortal and Duplicate officially retire as heroes. Cecil gathers the remaining Guardians, where Mark is informed of Rex Splode's death. Cecil even offers Mark leadership of the Guardians, but Mark refuses. And just when it seems like the nightmare is finally over, a new threat arrives. A viltrumite named Conquest has arrived on Earth, sent to check in on Invincible's progress in conquering the planet. Mark admits the recent events leave him wanting to punch something as hard as he can, and Conquest smiles. The two charge at each other just in time for the season finale. In the season finale, Conquest and Invincible launch into a brutal battle across the city. Early in the fight, Conquest makes it clear that he is not some noble representative of the Viltrum Empire, but a bloodthirsty warmonger who lives for combat. More than anything, he wants a true challenge, someone strong enough to give him the satisfaction he craves. As the fight escalates, Mark gradually earns Conquest's interest, even briefly taking the battle into space, which only seems to excite Conquest further, before he hurls Mark back down through more buildings. Their clash is broadcast live on television, and when Oliver sees it, he rushes in to help his brother. As Mark struggles to recover, Conquest slams into him from the sky with enough force to level a huge section of the city, killing thousands more in the process. Oliver tries to keep up, but Conquest's sheer speed is overwhelming, and he continues battering Mark through the air and across the ruins. Mark is driven through more buildings and even an oil truck, barely able to regain his bearings. Desperate, he even tries pleading with Conquest to stop, but Conquest ignores him and keeps attacking without mercy. That changes when Oliver arrives with a surprise uppercut, only to be swatted aside and grabbed by the leg. Mark saves him and once again tells him to run, but Oliver refuses, joining the fight and mocking Conquest for being old. It quickly becomes clear just how outmatched they both are. Conquest keeps overwhelming Mark, demanding that he embrace his Viltrumite side and fight like a true warrior. Mark tries to answer with a furious barrage of punches, but he quickly begins to wear out. Oliver jumps back in with a double kick, only to be brutally beaten as Conquest starts stretching his body to the breaking point. Mark saves him just in time, and as the fight rages on, Cecil and the GDA arrive just as they learn Eve has woken up. After regaining consciousness in the hospital, Adam Eve hears that Mark is still fighting for his life and immediately joins the battle, despite Cecil warning her that Conquest is far too dangerous. By this point, Conquest has already torn through streets and coastlines, killing hundreds more civilians while relentlessly beating Mark down. Eve arrives and initially manages to hold her own, but Conquest gradually adapts to her attacks, breaking through her defenses piece by piece before landing devastating blows to her face and abdomen, leaving her seemingly mortally wounded. Unable to help because Conquest shattered his femur, Mark can only fly forward to catch Eve as she falls. As Eve weakly cries in his arms, Mark descends to the ground in horror. All Mark can do is beg Cecil for help while trying to keep Eve conscious. From a distance, Conquest watches with fascination, admiring Mark's devotion to her, even reflecting that such emotional bonds don't exist on Viltrum. As Eve's life begins to slip away, Conquest continues monologuing, thanking Mark for finally giving him a chance to truly cut loose. With nothing left to lose, Mark threatens him, declaring that he can see the future, and Conquest does not survive it. Conquest laughs and welcomes the challenge. When the two collide again, Mark's arm is shattered, while Conquest's prosthetic arm is destroyed in the impact. Mark briefly gains the upper hand, and at the same time, Eve's body suddenly emits a pink aura that begins healing her injuries, restoring her leg, face, and abdomen. Mark continues pummeling Conquest until the burst of light from Eve distracts him just long enough for Conquest to pin him down. In the middle of the fight, Conquest unexpectedly confesses his own loneliness, while simultaneously choking Mark out. Before he can finish the job, Eve re-emerges and unleashes a massive blast that burns Conquest's skin and weakens him. With both arms ruined, Mark uses the last of his strength to finish Conquest with repeated headbutts. Exhausted and broken, Mark crawls back to Eve before passing out. Soon after, the Guardian's tech jacket and the GDA arrive at the scene after the battle is over. 3 days later, Mark is still recovering. Eve explains that nearly dying allows her to remove the mental blocks placed on her powers. At the same time, Cecil works with D.A. Sinclair to build his new reanimant using parts recovered from the dead Invincible variants. Debbie arrives with Paul, overcome with sadness over everything that had happened in Mark's life. Mark reassures her that none of it is her fault. When Cecil stops by to thank him, Mark only wants to know where Conquest's body is. He is shown the corpse and orders that it be burned. Elsewhere, the heroes gather to honor Rex Splode after his death. Robot chooses to take his name in order to carry on Rex's legacy, while Shrinking Ray mourns quietly on her own. Later, Eve tries to give a eulogy for Rex but can't get through it. Mark steps in to support her and Eve breaks down over the guilt of not having been there for Rex more. They go back to Mark's room and get busy, but as they do, a strange sign appears. The clothing Eve moved with her powers looks distorted. The finale also plants several hints about what is coming next in Season 4. Russ Livingston is shown in the sewers, foreshadowing the coming Sequid invasion of Earth. Battle Beast is rescued from space by members of the Coalition of Planets. Angstrom Levy, now missing an arm, is forced into cooperation with the technicians to repay his debt. Then comes one final reveal. In a secret base beneath the Mojave Desert lies Conquest's body. The GDA is keeping him alive underground, hoping to extract intelligence about the Viltrum Empire. In the hospital, Mark visits Oliver and apologizes. He admits Oliver was right and promises that next time, if someone like Angstrom appears again, he will not hesitate to kill them. Finally, in the post-credits scene, Damien Darkblood returns. Using a pentagram, he summons a dark entity, teasing the first show-only storyline.